It was a quiet night in the lower streets of New Vega City. Daniel had just finished his long shift at the space docks. His boots were heavy with dust and his eyes tired from welding all day. The streetlights flickered as he walked home through a narrow alley. This shortcut was dark and always smelled like old wires and oil. He didn't like walking here, but it saved him 10 minutes. He pulled his jacket tighter and looked down, lost in thought. Then, he heard something, a soft cry, almost like a whisper. He stopped walking and turned his head slowly. Another small cry came, this time clearer. It wasn't a cat or a broken machine. It sounded like a child. Daniel looked around, confused and alert, behind a stack of metal crates. Something moved. He stepped closer and asked, "Is someone there?" There was silence. Then a tiny voice replied, "Please help." Daniel took one careful step forward, heart beating faster. He saw her, a small alien girl with silver eyes and thin arms. She was hiding behind the crates, her clothes torn and dirty. Her skin glowed faintly, like soft moonlight. She looked scared, weak, and cold. Daniel bent down and asked, "Are you hurt? Where's your family?" Tears rolled down her cheeks as she cried. "My mom is about to give birth." He blinked, not sure he heard right. She grabbed his hand suddenly and said, "Please follow me." "She needs help." Daniel pulled back for a second, confused and unsure. He had heard of alien families hiding in the lower levels. Some were running from the law, others from something worse. He didn't want trouble, not tonight. Not ever, but her eyes, full of fear and hope, made him pause. "I can't do this alone," she whispered. Voice shaking, he looked around. No one else was there. No other footsteps, just the cold wind, the metal walls, and this child begging him. Daniel sighed and said, "All right. Show me the way." She stood up slowly and grabbed his hand again. Her fingers were cold but strong. They moved quickly through side alleys and down old stairs. Each step took them deeper into the forgotten parts of the city. Daniel noticed strange lights on the walls, symbols glowing faintly. "Where are we going?" he asked, trying to stay calm. "My home," she said. "It's hidden." "My mom can't move anymore." Daniel kept following. Heart pounding with every turn, he wondered if this was a mistake. If someone would jump out and rob him, but the girl never let go of his hand. She kept looking back to make sure he was still there. Finally, they reached a heavy metal door with no handle. The girl placed her palm on a panel, and the door hissed open. Inside was a strange tunnel with soft light and warm air. Daniel stepped in slowly, unsure of what waited ahead. He had only wanted to go home and sleep. Now he was following a glowing alien child into the unknown. But something inside told him this was the right thing to do. The door closed behind them with a soft click. Daniel was now part of something far bigger than he expected. And this was just the beginning. The tunnel was dark and silent, except for the soft hum of lights in the walls. Daniel followed the little alien girl through winding paths and broken walkways. She moved fast for someone so small. Her bare feet silent on the cold floor. Daniel kept glancing behind him. Half expecting someone to chase them, the air smelled old and electric, like rusted wires and forgotten machines every few steps. He saw strange symbols glowing faintly on the walls. They didn't look human. They pulsed with colors he couldn't name. "Where are we going?" he asked, his voice echoing down the metal tunnel. The girl looked back and said, "Almost there." "Please hurry." Her silver eyes were wide with worry. Her hand still holding his tight after 10 more turns. They reached a large wall that looked like solid steel. No door, no buttons. Just metal from floor to ceiling. Daniel frowned. But the girl stepped forward confidently. She placed her small hand on a round glowing panel hidden near the side. The metal shimmered like water, then split open with a hiss. A hidden entrance appeared, smooth, silent, and glowing soft blue inside. Daniel hesitated, unsure if this was a trap or something worse. The girl turned and said, "She's just ahead." "But she's not doing well." Her voice cracked like she was about to cry. Daniel took a deep breath and stepped inside. The walls were smooth and warm. Like living crystal, lights floated gently above. Moving with their footsteps, the girl led him into a small chamber where another alien woman lay on the floor. Her skin was a dull shade of blue, her eyes half closed. She clutched her swollen stomach, breathing in short, sharp gasps. The girl rushed to her side and whispered, "Mom, I found someone." The mother looked up weakly, her voice barely a whisper. "You brought a human." Daniel knelt beside her and said, "I don't know what's going on, but I want to help." She nodded slowly and winced in pain. The little girl said, "She's going to give birth soon." But something's wrong. Daniel looked around the room for supplies, anything that could help. There were no machines, no medicine, just smooth walls and glowing patterns. The mother's body trembled, her breathing uneven. "She needs help from a human," the girl said again. "Your voice can calm her." Daniel didn't understand, but he nodded. He sat beside the mother and began talking gently. He told her stories about the stars, about the ships he fixed, about the Earth's sky. With every word, her body relaxed a little more. The walls around them glowed brighter, as if responding to his voice. Daniel didn't stop speaking, even when his throat became dry. He talked about his sister's baby, about kindness, about hope. The baby inside her shifted, and the woman groaned softly. Suddenly, the lights blinked once, twice, and then dimmed. The girl looked up and whispered, "They're coming." Daniel paused, confused. "Who's coming?" The girl whispered, "The ones who hunt us." A soft clicking sound echoed from the tunnel outside. It was faint, but growing louder every second. Daniel stood up and moved in front of the girl and her mother. He picked up a long metal rod lying near the wall. His hand shook, but he gripped it tight. "Stay behind me," he said, his voice firm now. He didn't know what was about to come through that door, but he knew one thing for sure. He would not let them take her. Not the baby, not the girl, not the mother. Not while he was still breathing. Daniel stood frozen, listening to the clicking sounds growing louder in the tunnel. His hands tightened around the metal rod as his heart pounded harder. Behind him, the alien girl knelt beside her mother. Whispering softly, the woman's skin was turning pale, her breathing becoming weaker. Daniel looked down at her and realized something was very wrong. She wasn't just in labor, her body was failing, breaking down too fast. The girl's voice cracked as she said, "She's dying, isn't she?" Daniel didn't want to answer, but the truth was clear. He knelt beside the mother again and asked, "What can I do?" The woman opened her eyes slowly and whispered, "Speak. Speak more." Daniel nodded and began talking again, using a calm, low voice. He told her about warm food, about music from Earth, about laughter. As he spoke, a strange glow formed around her body. The crystals in the wall echoed the soft colors of his words. The baby inside her kicked, and she cried out in pain. Daniel reached out and gently held her wrist. The girl said, "Your voice. It's helping the baby stay alive." Daniel didn't understand why, but he trusted the girl. He kept speaking, even louder now, telling stories full of hope and love. The mother's eyes were wet, but her lips curled into a small smile. Then she whispered something Daniel didn't expect. "You must protect them. Both, they'll be hunted." Daniel's breath caught. "Who's hunting them?" She coughed and looked toward the tunnel entrance. "Others. Like us. But broken inside," she said weakly, before Daniel could ask more. The lights in the walls began to flicker. The baby was coming, and the room was reacting to it. The mother screamed in pain as her body arched. Daniel quickly placed his jacket beneath her back. The girl cried, "Please help her, don't let her die." Daniel had no training, but his hands moved without thinking. He whispered to the mother, guiding her with his voice, "You can do this. Just breathe, just one more push." The walls pulsed brighter, and the air filled with a low hum. Then the cry of a newborn echoed through the chamber. A small glowing baby boy lay in the mother's arms. But she was barely holding on, her body shaking. She looked up at Daniel. Her voice like wind. "His name is Ron. Protect him." She placed the baby in Daniel's arms, then pulled the girl close. The girl sobbed, "Mama, don't leave us." The woman kissed her daughter's forehead, smiled softly, and then faded. Her body shimmered like glass and vanished into particles of light. Daniel stood still, the newborn in his arms, the girl clinging to his leg. For a moment, everything was silent. Then a sharp clicking noise snapped his attention back. The sound was closer now. Someone was inside the tunnel. Daniel whispered, "We have to move now." He passed the baby to the girl carefully and grabbed the metal rod again. The entrance to the chamber blinked red, warning them of movement. Daniel stood between the kids and the door, heart heavy but full of fire. He didn't know who was coming, but they wouldn't get past him easily. Not now, not after what he had seen. He whispered to the girl, "If I say run, you run." She nodded, holding her baby brother close. And just as the door hissed open, the real danger began. The door hissed open with a sharp sound. Daniel stood tall, holding the metal rod like a sword. His body ached, but he didn't move from his place. Behind him, the little alien girl held her newborn brother close to her chest. Her silver eyes were wide with fear as the shadows moved closer. Daniel took a deep breath and whispered, "Stay low, protect him from the tunnel." Strange figures stepped into the light, tall, thin, with sharp armor and glowing red eyes. They made no sound with their steps, but their presence filled the room like poison. One of them clicked in a strange language, then looked directly at the baby. Daniel's voice cut through the tension. "You're not taking him." The creatures tilted their heads. Confused but not afraid, one stepped forward, raising a weapon shaped like a needle blade. Daniel didn't wait. He rushed forward with a loud yell. The metal rod slammed into the creature's chest. Sparking with force, the alien screamed and fell. But two others rushed Daniel at once. He blocked one attack and ducked another. But the second blade sliced his arm. He shouted in pain, swinging wildly to keep them away behind him. The girl began humming, a soft, strange sound full of light. The baby glowed in her arms as her voice grew louder. The walls reacted, lighting up in bright crystal colors. The humming turned into a soft vibration through the air. The attackers paused, confused by the shift in energy. Daniel used the moment to strike again, knocking one backward. But another creature stabbed forward. Cutting across his ribs, he fell to one knee, blood dripping from his shirt. The girl cried out, "Stop hurting him!" And the room shook. The crystal lights exploded into bright pulses, like a storm of stars. The baby's glow turned blinding white, and the walls responded with a wave of light. A pulse burst from the chamber's heart, knocking all the creatures off their feet. Daniel shielded his eyes as the wave passed through him gently. The attackers screamed as their armor cracked and shattered. The girl fell quiet, the baby now softly glowing in her arms again. Daniel looked up, gasping for air, his body shaking but alive. The creatures were gone, only dust and broken metal remained on the ground. The hum faded, and the room fell silent again. Daniel turned to the girl, who sat still and pale. She whispered, "That was my mother's last gift. She left it inside the walls, Daniel crawled to her and gently took the baby into his arms. The boy was warm, peaceful, and breathing softly. Daniel looked at the girl and said, "We have to leave. More could come," she nodded. Still trembling, "There's a pod. My mom built it. Together, they helped each other to their feet." Daniel's wounds were deep, but he pushed forward. The girl led him through a small tunnel behind the chamber. They reached a broken silver pod buried in crystal walls. It looked damaged. But Daniel recognized the tech, old but fixable. He placed the baby inside and knelt to check the controls. The girl watched him, then placed her hand on a crystal panel. Lights came on, the pod still worked. "Barely," Daniel whispered. "We can escape." If it holds together, he looked back one last time toward the chamber. The place where a mother had died to give her children life, and where a human had chosen to stand between light and darkness. He climbed into the pod, the girl beside him. Her hand still shaking as the door closed, Daniel whispered, "Hold on," and with a soft rumble, the pod launched into the unknown below. The escape pod sped through the underground tunnel. Shaking with every turn, sparks flew from broken wires, and the lights inside flickered. Daniel held onto the side rail with one hand and clutched the baby with the other. Beside him, the alien girl stared at the screen, her eyes wide with fear. "They're following us," she whispered, her voice trembling. Daniel looked at the radar. 3 red dots were closing in fast. "Who are they?" he asked, trying to keep his voice calm. The girl whispered, "Hunters. They take alien children." For experiments, Daniel's stomach twisted, rage rising in his chest. "They've taken many from my kind." She said softly, "My father tried to fight them. He never came back." Daniel gritted his teeth. "Then they picked the wrong kids to chase this time." The pod jolted hard as something exploded behind them. A small drone had fired. The blast cracked the side panel of the pod. Warning lights flashed red, and smoke filled the cabin. Daniel coughed and pressed buttons to reroute power. The baby began to cry, his soft glowing skin flickering weakly. The girl held his hand and hummed gently, calming him. Daniel glanced at the rear camera. A dark ship was flying low, spider-shaped and silent. It moved like a predator, patient and fast. Another shot missed them by inches. Shaking the pod again, Daniel narrowed his eyes. "We can't outrun them like this." He saw a fork in the tunnel up ahead. One way went deeper, darker, unknown. He turned the controls sharply, sending the pod into the hidden path. The girl gasped as the lights disappeared and the pod dropped sharply downward. It flew through total darkness, guided only by memory and hope. Daniel held the controls steady. Even as the pod scraped the walls, suddenly, the radar blinked again. The hunter ship had followed them inside. "They won't stop," she whispered. "They always finish their hunt." Daniel looked at the baby in his arms, so small, so fragile. Then he looked at the girl, brave but afraid. "No," he said quietly. "Not today." He saw a strange glowing mark appear on the tunnel wall, a hidden entrance. He slammed the controls and forced the pod to crash through it. The pod burst into a hidden cavern filled with crystals and ancient tech. It landed roughly, skidding to a stop beside a broken machine. Daniel quickly opened the pod's hatch and helped the girl out. He handed her the baby and said, "Hide behind that rock, stay low." "No matter what." She nodded and ran with the baby in her arms, disappearing behind the glowing stones. Daniel turned and picked up a heavy pipe from the pod's floor. The tunnel behind them cracked open, and the spider-like ship hovered into the cavern. 3 hunter drones dropped from it, metal legs clicking against the crystal floor. They scanned the area, red lights glowing from their eyes. One of them detected movement. It turned toward Daniel. He stepped out into the open. Standing tall despite the pain in his ribs, "You want them?" he shouted. "You'll have to go through me." The drones charged, and Daniel swung the pipe with all his strength. The battle was uneven metal claws against a wounded man, but he didn't back down. Each blow he landed bought more time for the children to stay hidden. His body bled, his vision blurred, but he stood like a wall. The cavern echoed with the sound of metal striking metal and one man refusing to fall. And then something ancient stirred in the stones. Daniel's body slammed into the crystal floor as the last drone knocked him back. His chest burned, his arms were cut, and blood ran down his face. But even on his knees, he raised the pipe again. The hunters moved in, cold and silent. Their glowing red eyes fixed on him, suddenly. The crystals in the cave pulsed with bright light. A hum rose from the ground, low and ancient. Like the song of a buried god, the air shifted, and the walls responded to something deep inside the baby. The child, still cradled in his sister's arms, began to glow brighter. The girl gasped as the energy wrapped around her like soft light. The drones paused, scanning the strange power in the air. Daniel looked up, confused but hopeful. The girl whispered, "It's the life force." "For my mother?" She left it in him. One of the drones lunged forward, and the crystals answered. A beam of energy shot from the wall. Slamming into the drone and shattering it, the cave shook as pieces of metal flew through the air. The other two drones clicked loudly, retreating slightly. Daniel grabbed the chance and shouted, "Run, now!" The girl picked up the baby and ran toward the far side of the cave. Daniel limped after her, his legs weak but full of purpose, behind them. The spider ship hissed and released more drones. The ceiling cracked as the power inside the baby overloaded the crystal walls. Flames burst from one of the ancient machines, setting the corner of the cave on fire. Smoke filled the air, thick and choking. Daniel covered the girl's face with his torn jacket and guided her through the smoke. "We're almost out," he whispered. Coughing hard, she pointed ahead. "There, a tunnel gate. It leads to the surface." He nodded and ran faster. Ignoring the pain in his side, the fire chased them, the heat growing hotter with every step. Behind them, the remaining drones tried to follow. But the baby's glowing light made the walls respond again. This time, the crystal walls collapsed, trapping the drones beneath falling stone. Daniel turned back to see the fire closing in like a wave. "Go!" he shouted, shoving the girl through the last doorway. She stumbled out into fresh air and starlight. Daniel followed just as the tunnel behind them collapsed in a fiery roar. They rolled onto the grass of a hidden ridge high above the city. The stars above were clear, silent, and endless. The baby stopped crying and stared at the sky for the first time. His tiny hands reached out like he could touch the stars. Daniel lay flat on the ground, coughing and gasping for breath. The girl crawled beside him and hugged him tight. "You saved us," she said. Her voice shaking, Daniel looked up at her. Barely able to speak, "I just couldn't let them take you," he whispered. She smiled softly and placed the baby on his chest. Daniel looked at the baby's glowing eyes, full of warmth and peace. "Hey there, little guy," he said, his voice weak but gentle. "You've got some serious power in you." The girl looked around and whispered, "We can't stay here. They might come again." Daniel nodded. "Then we find shelter, somewhere safe." "Somewhere human eyes won't judge you," she asked. "Will you stay with us?" Daniel looked at her, then at the baby, and smiled through the pain. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. "You're mine now." And as the stars looked down, a broken man, an alien girl, and her glowing baby brother disappeared into the night. The sun rose slowly over the distant hills, casting soft orange light across the quiet field. Daniel sat beside an old wooden fence, his shirt torn, his ribs still aching. But his arms were full. The baby slept peacefully against his chest. Warm and glowing, beside him, The alien girl leaned against his shoulder. Her eyes tired but calm. They had walked through the night, leaving behind fire, metal, and death. Now they sat in silence, breathing in the cool morning air for the first time. Daniel felt like the world had slowed down. The girl looked up at him and asked, "What happens now?" Daniel took a deep breath and whispered, "Now we live." She blinked, confused, but the hunters, the people in the city. What if they come again? Daniel looked out across the fields and said, "We stay quiet, stay hidden, and build a life." She frowned. "But where?" "We have no home." Daniel smiled gently. "Then we make one." He stood slowly, careful not to wake the baby, and pointed to an old farmhouse in the distance. It looked abandoned, the roof broken, the walls cracked, but the land untouched. "That used to be my uncle's," he said. "No one goes there anymore." They walked toward it slowly, each step filled with hope and uncertainty. The baby stirred but didn't cry, as if he knew he was safe. When they reached the front door, Daniel kicked it open gently. Dust filled the air, and silence echoed inside, but the walls stood strong, and sunlight poured through broken windows. Daniel set the baby down in an old blanket and looked around. "We'll fix it," he said, more to himself than to her. The girl touched the wall and smiled. "It feels warm." They spent the day cleaning, gathering food from nearby fields and repairing the rooms. Daniel taught her how to use tools, how to fix broken pipes. She showed him how to light crystals for warmth. Together, they worked in quiet peace. When night fell, they sat near a fire built from old wood and glowing stone. The baby cooed softly, reaching for the flickering light. The girl placed her hand on Daniel's and asked, "Do you miss your old life?" Daniel looked at the flames, then at her, and shook his head. "No," he said, This is where I'm meant to be." She smiled, the kind of smile that only comes after pain and survival. "Will you protect us forever?" she asked. Daniel nodded, his voice firm. "Until my last breath." Outside, the wind moved through the tall grass like a song. High above, ships flew silently across the stars, unaware, uncaring, distant. But in this quiet place, a new story had begun. A human man with nothing left had found everything he didn't know he was missing. A girl with no family had found a father, and a child born of light and loss now had someone to guide him. They didn't have a last name. They didn't have a planet to call home. But they had each other, and that was more than enough. As the fire crackled softly, Daniel whispered a promise into the night. "No matter what comes, I'll raise you like my own. Both of you." The baby's eyes fluttered open, glowing gently in the dark. The girl leaned her head on Daniel's shoulder and closed her eyes, and for the first time in a long time, there was peace, not just in the house, but in Daniel's heart. He wasn't just a protector anymore. He was a father.